Hello and welcome to the presentation named Goals and Techniques for Teaching Grammar. This goal has three implications. Number one, students need overt instruction that connects grammar points with larger communication contexts. Number two, students do not need to master every aspect of each grammar point, only those that are relevant to the immediate communication task. And number three, error correction is not always the instructor's first responsibility. Adult students appreciate and benefit from direct instruction that allows them to apply critical thinking skills to language learning. Instructors can take advantage of this by providing explanations that give students a descriptive understanding, that is, declarative knowledge of each point of grammar. Teach the grammar point in the target language or the student's first language or both. The goal is to facilitate understanding. Limit the time you devote to grammar explanations to 10-minute stops, especially for lower level students whose ability to sustain attention can be limited. Present grammar points in written and oral ways to address the needs of students with different learning styles. An important part of grammar instruction is providing examples. Teachers need to plan their examples carefully around two basic principles. 1. Be sure the examples are accurate and appropriate. They must present the language appropriately, be culturally appropriate for the setting in which they are used, and be to the point of the lesson. Number 2. Use examples as teaching tools. Focus examples on a particular theme or topic so that students have more contact with specific information and vocabulary. In the communicative competence model, the purpose of learning grammar is to learn the language of which the grammar is a part. Instructors, therefore, teach grammar forms and structures in relation to meaning and use for the specific communication tasks that students need to complete. Language teachers and language learners are often frustrated by the disconnect between knowing the rules of grammar and being able to apply those rules automatically in listening, speaking, reading, and writing. This disconnect reflects a separation between declarative knowledge and procedural knowledge. Declarative knowledge is knowledge about something. Declarative knowledge enables a student to describe a rule of grammar and apply it in a pattern practice drill. Procedural knowledge is knowledge of how to do something. Procedural knowledge enables a student to apply a rule of grammar in communication. For example, declarative knowledge is what you have when you read and understand instructions for programming a DVD player. Procedural knowledge is what you demonstrate when you program the DVD player. Procedural knowledge does not translate automatically into declarative knowledge. Many native speakers can use their language clearly and correctly without being able to state the rules of its grammar. Likewise, declarative knowledge does not translate automatically into procedural knowledge. Students may be able to state the grammar rule, but consistently fail to apply the rule when speaking or writing. To address the declarative knowledge-procedural knowledge dichotomy, teachers and students can apply several strategies. Identify the relationship of declarative knowledge and procedural knowledge to students' goals for learning the language. Students who plan to use the language exclusively for reading journal articles need to focus more on the declarative knowledge of grammar and discourse structures that will help them understand those texts. Students who plan to live in country need to focus more on the procedural knowledge that will help them manage day-to-day oral and written interactions. Recognize that development of declarative knowledge can accelerate development of procedural knowledge. Teaching students how the language works and giving them opportunities to compare it with other languages they know allows them to draw on critical thinking and analytical skills. These processes can support the development of the innate understanding that characterizes procedural knowledge. Understand that students develop both procedural and declarative knowledge on the basis of the input they receive. This input includes both finely tuned input that requires students to pay attention to the relationships among form, meaning, and use for a specific grammar rule, and roughly tuned input that allows students to encounter the grammar rule in a variety of contexts. Discourse analyst Douglas Bieber has demonstrated that different communication types can be characterized by the clusters of linguistic features that are common to those types. Verb tense and aspect, sentence length and structure, and larger discourse patterns all may contribute to the distinctive profile of a given communication type. For example, a history textbook and a newspaper article in English both use past tense verbs almost exclusively. However, the newspaper article will use short sentences and a discourse pattern that alternates between subjects or perspectives. The history textbook will use complex sentences and will follow a timeline in its discourse structure. Awareness of these features allows students to anticipate the forms and structures they will encounter in a given communication task. Mechanical drills in which students substitute pronouns for nouns or alternate the person, number, or tense of verbs can help students memorize irregular forms and challenging structures. However, students do not develop the ability to use grammar correctly in oral and written interactions by doing mechanical drills because these drills separate form from meaning and use. The content of the prompt and the response is set in advance. The student only has to supply the correct grammatical form and can do that without really needing to understand or communicate anything. The main lesson that students learn from doing these drills is grammar is boring. Communicative drills encourage students to connect form, meaning, and use because multiple correct responses are possible. In communicative drills, students respond to a prompt using the grammar point under consideration, but providing their own content. For example, to practice questions and answers in the past tense in English, teacher and students can ask and answer questions about activities the previous evening. The drill is communicative because none of the content is set in advance. For example, teacher asks, "Did you go to the library last night?" Student 1 responds, "No, I didn't. I went to the movies." Then asks student number 2, "Did you read chapter 3?" Student 3 responds, "Yes, I read chapter 3, but I didn't understand it." Then asks student number 4, "Did you understand chapter 3?" Student 4 says, "I didn't read chapter 3. I went to the movies with student 1." Many courses and textbooks, especially those designed for lower proficiency levels, use a specified sequence of grammatical topics as their organizing principle. When this is the case, classroom activities need to reflect the grammar point that is being introduced or reviewed. By contrast, when a course curriculum follows a topic sequence, grammar points can be addressed as they come up. For curricula that introduce grammatical forms in a specified sequence, instructors need to develop activities that relate form to meaning and use. Describe the grammar point including form, meaning, and use, and give examples, that is, structured input. Ask students to practice the grammar point in communicative drills, that is, structured output. Have students do a communicative task that provides opportunities to use a grammar point, that is communicative output. For curricula that follows a sequence of topics, instructors need to develop activities that relate the topic discourse that is used to form and meaning. Provide oral or written input, for example, audio tapes or reading selections that address the topic, that is structured input. Review the point of grammar using examples from the material, that is structured input. Ask students to practice the grammar point in communicative drills that focus on the topic, that is structured output. Have students do a communicative task on the topic, that is communicative output also. When instructors have the opportunity to develop part or the entire course curriculum, they can develop a series of contexts based on the real-world tasks that students will need to perform using the language, and then teach grammar and vocabulary in relation to those contexts. Textbooks usually provide one or more of the following three types of grammar exercises. Number 1, mechanical drills. Each prompt has only one correct response, and students can complete the exercise without attending to meaning. For example, George waited for the bus this morning. He will wait for the bus tomorrow morning too. Number 2, meaningful drills. Each prompt has only one correct response, and students must attend to meaning to complete the exercise. For example, where are George's papers? They are in his notebook. Students must understand the meaning of the question in order to answer, but only one correct answer is possible because they all know where George's papers are. To use textbook grammar exercises effectively, instructors need to recognize which type they are, devote the appropriate amount of time to them, and supplement them as needed. When deciding which textbook drills to use and how much time to allot to them, keep the relative value in mind. Mechanical drills are the least useful because they bear little resemblance to real communication. They do not require students to learn anything. They only require parroting of a pattern or rule. Meaningful drills can help students develop understanding of the working of rules of grammar because they require students to make form-meaning correlations. The resemblance to real communication is limited by the fact that they have only one correct answer. Communicative drills require students to be aware of the relationships among form, meaning, and use. In communicative drills, students test and develop their ability to use language to convey ideas and information. Mechanical tests do serve one purpose. They motivate students to memorize. They can therefore serve as prompts to encourage memorization of irregular forms and vocabulary items. Because they test only memory capacity, not language ability, they are best used as quizzes and given relatively little weight in evaluating students' performance and progress. Just as mechanical drills do not teach students the language, mechanical tests questions do not assess their ability to use it in authentic ways. In order to provide authentic assessment of students' grammar proficiency, an evaluation must reflect real-life uses of grammar in context. This means that the activity must have a purpose other than assessment and require students to demonstrate their level of grammar proficiency by completing some task. To develop authentic assessment activities, begin with the types of tasks that students will actually need to do using the language. Assessment can then take the form of communicative drills and communicative activities like those used in the teaching process. For example, an activity based on audio tapes of public address announcement can be converted into an assessment by having students respond orally or in writing to questions about a similar tape. In this type of assessment, the instructor uses a checklist or rubric to evaluate the student's understanding and/or use of grammar in context.